At this time, it's my pleasure to call upon our President, Christian Leinbach, for his report. Christian?
Thank you very much for the opportunity to serve as your president for the year 2013. In March of 2007, a gentleman that I knew and still know today walked up to me and he handed me a note. I was running for county commissioner and I've kept that note in my wallet ever since. He said, "Dear Christian, I'm pleased to advise you that I will support you in your endeavors to win the election. You are a great friend and I believe in you. Remember to be honest and communicate with the public. You will be great. Good luck, Chet and Doris Perfetto." I've carried that around with that simple admonition, to be honest and to communicate. This morning I want to share with you some things about serving as president and serving this wonderful organization. When I was elected, I thought I had somewhat of an idea of what a commissioner did. And then I was invited to the CCAP New Elected Officials Program in November of 2007. That's where I met many of you for the first time. People that otherwise I wouldn't know today, apart from this organization and apart from this elected office. But I learned so much about the job of being a commissioner, both formally from working sessions, but informally from the people that I met, the people that I talked to. It was there that I signed up to participate in the CCAP Academy. I owe a lot to CCAP. I owe a lot to each of you. And now I stand before you to give a report. We're not through the year, just about in our 8th month, and 2013 has been a busy but a very productive year. We've had some major victories. We've had some major frustrations. Let's review where we are thus far, and I'd like to start with our 9 priorities. Human services funding and further system reform. We were able to expand the Human Service Block Grant to 10 more counties, and we were able to maintain our 12-13 funding for the 13-14 budget. Item 2, assessment reform. We saw the signing into law of Act 2 of 2013, dealing with the State Tax Equalization Board reform. Item 3, funding and modernization solutions for transportation on structure, ongoing. 4, maintaining and improving 911 services. We saw the signing of Act 9 of 2013 regarding some 911 reforms. Number 5, inmates with mental illness and substance abuse issues. In May, Berks County Commissioner Kevin Barnhart, also chair of our CCAP Courts and Corrections, was invited to testify before the House Democratic Policy Committee on mental health and justice issues. Number 6, shale gas impacts. One of the big items, the Department of Environmental Protection announced the opening of Alternatives Fuel Incentive Grant. This provides about $10 million for light and medium weight vehicles, 14,000 and under, to convert to CNG. Number 7, prevailing wage reform, ongoing. However, we, through CCAP's leadership, have pulled together a statewide coalition of other local government entities calling on the Commonwealth for serious prevailing wage reform. The restoration of the county recycling fee, priority 8, is ongoing. And priority 9, the county veterans director accreditation. We saw the passage of Act 5 of 2013 requiring veterans director accreditation. In some other legislative areas, we saw a loss, a win, and we don't know, on the jury commissioner. We came into the year thinking we had resolved the jury commissioner issue, but the legal challenge told us otherwise, and I don't know if it's record time, but in Harrisburg, timing, it was certainly an amazing light speed action to get a bill passed, both houses, signed by the governor, and even faster for the jury commissioners to challenge it in court again. As most of you know, we just won at the Commonwealth Court level, and this will go on to the Supreme Court. But that's a huge win, to be able to see this organization say, okay, we just got hit, we're going to come right back, we know that we're right, and we were able to win. Item 2, Act 41 of 2013. We stood here, many of us at least, heard Brian Smith in the spring of this year talk about what has happened to development in Wayne County. Many of us, I believe, went back home and found out that that was a problem in our own area. I found that in Berks County. And in the period from spring until today, we saw the passage of Act 41 of 2013. It responds to the Pine Creek Valley Watershed Association issue versus DEP, and it is a big win for our County Commissioners Association. But there's some... That was Brian beginning that applause. I am proud that the state representative that led that charge is David Maloney from Berks County, Pennsylvania. But we have some remaining challenges. Prevailing wage reform. Threshold legislation should be a no-brainer. $25,000 in 1962 means $190,000 is the right number in 2013. But common sense is not so common when it comes to Harrisburg and probably Washington as well. We need to continue the pressure to get threshold legislation passed. It can be done. Transportation. Transportation has been a frustrating battle. We might have thought that a bill coming out of the Senate, 45-5, meant smooth sailing. It's been anything but. I have highlighted to my delegation and to legislators around the Commonwealth that CCAP members are not asking for new capacity projects. We are asking for the dollars necessary to maintain the bridges and roads we have, and for two reasons. It's critical to economic development, but more importantly, it is critical to public safety. Public safety is the number one job we have. I believe it's the number one job of government at all levels. And believe me, many of our roads and our bridges are putting our citizens at risk. We need transportation funding, and we need it this year. Number 5, we should not be standing here today having to choose which 10 counties get to go into the Human Services Block Grant, but that's where we are. We need the Human Service Block Grant expanded to all willing counties. There have also been some great successes in the CCAP arena. The online voting opportunity that we saw take place for the first time in the spring conference saw significantly more people able to vote on CCAP positions, so that we are able to go to our legislators and to the governor and say, when we have a position on a resolution, every county in the Commonwealth had an opportunity to vote on this resolution. We saw the groundbreaking to expand, or are seeing, I believe while we're here, the groundbreaking to expand and consolidate our CCAP offices. Those offices should be ready for a ribbon cutting sometime around this time next year. We've seen the continued financial strength in our CCAP insurance programs. The CCAP technology department has exploded with growth, especially around the Unified Case Management Program. We have 2 new ad hoc committees, elections and turnpike. Elections being co-chaired by Stephanie Singer of Philadelphia County and Bob Thomas of Franklin County, have addressed some serious issues relative to election reform. We have several of your county election directors participating in that committee, along with representatives from the state. The Turnpike ad hoc committee is led by Craig Cutshall of Fulton County. And they are looking at the issue of turnpike lands that are being used for profit purposes but not generating any local property tax. We also have two new standing committees. The Military and Veterans Affairs Committee saw a big win this year under the leadership of Wayne Nostein, and that is the Veterans Director's Accreditation. It's pretty impressive to be able to be in your first year as a CCAP standing committee and be able to have that as a success. And secondly, our Academy for Excellence in County Government. I am extremely excited. Pam Tokarikis is leading this effort, and I believe it's very likely that in the near future, Pennsylvania will start its own leadership institute similar to the NACO Leadership Institute to give a week-long intensive training to commissioners that want to participate. Currently, the NACO program allows one commissioner from Pennsylvania to participate once a year. This program would expand that. But as I stand here, this is not about a single person. It's not about me. You see, there's very little in life that we do alone. This is about a team. This is not my list of accomplishments. This is our list of accomplishments and challenges. CCAP members, our staff, our affiliates, our fellow state association that have stood with us on critical issues, even our vendors who help us with solutions in our counties and help sponsor events like this, all of them are part of the team that helps make CCAP what it is. To all of them and all of you, I want to say thank you. 2013 has been a very good year so far. We still have nearly 5 months left. We need to keep the heat on. We need to keep doing the things that brought us to where we are today. In closing, may I share 3 brief but poignant challenges, not just for yourself, but for me as well. The first, it's not the critic who counts. Many decades ago, Teddy Roosevelt gave the famous speech known as In the Arena. And he said, it's not the critic who counts, the credit belongs to the man, I would add, or woman, who is in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs and comes up short, but knows great enthusiasm and spends himself. Nobody understands how easy it is to be a critic more than an elected official. There are people all around us that are critics. I love a previous boss, Jim Adams, as a manager in his company. He would not allow a manager to walk into his office and tell him about a problem if we didn't have at least one idea on how to correct that problem. Because, folks, it isn't the critic who counts. It's the person that's out there looking for solutions. And that is what we are all about. That's what county commissioners do, I think, far better than many of our legislators in Harrisburg and Washington. We look for solutions. So when you get that critic, don't worry about that critic, because it's not the critic who counts. It's you. It's the people that are in the arena. But when you have a critic that comes to you with an idea, embrace them. Thank them. Even if it's not a perfect idea, that's something I learned from Jim. It gives you a starting point, and it shows they're not just a critic. There's somebody that wants to help. Secondly, don't forget the perspective of our constituents. This has been hard for me. I've had several occasions where people who supported my candidacy have gotten very angry at something they read in the newspaper, something they heard me say, and initially, and unfortunately sometimes, I fired back. Until one day, probably a year and a half ago, I sat down and said to myself, if I was in their shoes and only knew what they knew, what would I think of me? And I had to admit, in many cases, I would have thought the exact same thing. And what it's helped me do is stop and say, okay, maybe I'm not giving enough information. Remember that note from the beginning? Be honest. You make a mistake, say so, and communicate. I need to think about the perspective that my constituent has, because often it isn't the same. In fact, 99% of the time, it's not the same perspective we have. Finally, don't forget what really matters the most. Faith, family, friends, and freedom. I'm not smart enough to do this job. Every day I ask for God to guide me. When I make mistakes, I take responsibility. That's not God's fault. But we need our faith. We need not be afraid to stand up and say, I believe in God. I believe there's somebody stronger than I am. 2, never set aside family or friends for your work or anything else. You have spouses that support you, maybe children. You have friends. Don't sacrifice them on the altar of political expediency. It's so easy to do, and so many people do it. It's not worth it. Walk away from being a county commissioner before sacrificing your family and friends. And finally, freedom. Freedom of worship. Freedom of press. Freedom of speech. Freedom of assembly. Freedom of petition. The 5 freedoms. If we don't have that, we have nothing. We don't have a country. In 1979, I was invited to visit Czechoslovakia. 2 of my aunts took me. I was 19 years old. I spent 5 weeks visiting with relatives in both of those countries. And I'll never forget any of the trip, but especially one evening as I sat down with a group of young people, some older, some younger, and through my aunt, talked to them about what it was like living in America. Now keep in mind, 1979, when I got off the plane in Budapest, Hungary, and walked down the steps onto the tarmac, there were 2 Soviet soldiers with German Shepherds and AK-47s saying, actually didn't say anything, but welcome to Budapest, Hungary. And after a while, one of them said to me, we don't understand what you mean when you say freedom. And I tried to explain it, and I couldn't. Because you see, these young people never grew up in freedom. They didn't understand it. It was like trying to explain air to someone who'd never breathed air. And so when I came home, I promised God and I promised myself I would do whatever it took to support and defend freedom so that my children and my grandchildren never grew up not understanding what it was. Because in the end, freedom is to the spirit what oxygen is to the body. A body without oxygen dies. So the spirit of a man without freedom has no reason to live. Thank you for all that you do. God bless you. God bless our Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and the United States of America. Thank you.
Thank you, Christian, and personally, thank you for your continued leadership and guidance for this organization. Very good job.